Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, as I take up more of your questions in another segment of Ask Judy. I have a set of questions here from Jack Kirby, and he said, when you end a scene and it's an emotional scene, how do you come down from that after the shooting? Do you walk off set for a bit and clear your head and that sort of thing? Yeah, and I can only speak for myself, but usually when I'm done with that kind of a scene, I can let go of it pretty quickly because it's just for me like an energy and emotional state there that I can then, just breathe, step away from, shake it off, get some space, look at the sky, whatever. I can start engaging in conversation with people because I'm no longer having to kind of maintain that accessibility to that heavy emotion. So if it's at the end of the day, then I have the drive home. I have time to decompress. If it is something where I'm going to be shooting another scene, not too long after, then getting some space, breathing, reorienting myself with the here and the now, as opposed to whatever was going on for the character in that time. So that's pretty much what happens with me. Then you said, I know the culture of smoking has drastically changed since the 70s, so I'm curious, was smoking done on your sets, interior, exterior, and how was that arranged? Because if you don't like smoke or react to it, what's the polite way of managing that? Very true that during the course of the Waltons, a lot of the crew and some of the cast and certainly some of the guest stars and whatnot did smoke. And there were always sort of ash cans around on the certainly the exterior lots. I don't totally remember if people smoked on the soundstage or whether that was an environment where they didn't. I don't know. I don't know why I don't remember that. I don't like being around smoke. I was never really a smoker. So I think people may have stepped outside the soundstage to smoke, things like that, because being a closed environment like that. But I certainly know when I worked in theater, everybody on the production team smoked except me. And I'd end up in these production meetings and everybody was smoking all through them. And because I was the only one who didn't, it was kind of too bad, you are outnumbered. I mean, I guess it was just something that we all did our best. I would, try and stay away from the smoke when I could. And I'd just deal with it if I had to. And then you have another question. It seemed clear to me that actors in Hollywood today are even more under scrutiny than ever before due to the birth of technology. Do you ever ask yourself, if the Waltons premiered today and became a hit, how could anyone cope with the greater lack of privacy? That's a great question, and so true. I am so grateful that when we were coming up and so successful with the show that there wasn't all the social media that there is and that everybody you encountered didn't have a phone that they could be shooting candid pictures of you and shooting video and really invading your privacy in your life. I mean, it was tricky enough to, if you got spotted, to try to be gracious in all circumstances, no matter what kind of a day you were having. And I can see why actors sometimes maybe just lose it for a moment, that it's a lot. And I am grateful for the time period that I came up where that wasn't the issue. And you could have a degree of privacy when you were out, or even if people came up to you, they didn't automatically have a camera with them and they couldn't be across the street and shooting video of you without your permission. So, I don't know. I think it's tough for actors today, especially young people coming up who may not have just quite the perspective to understand how to protect themselves and also how to make choices in public that protect them and don't make them such a target for, people posting things that are unkind. And then finally, one more. Thinking of the fact that while you can take acting classes, what things are actors expected to just figure out as an actor? I know you mentioned things like watching where you position yourself on a set, but there has to be hidden rules that you have to figure out as you go along. Well, I know when I was teaching that in a class that was about acting for television, that we would include dealing with things like how to find your mark that you need to hit and about lights, and try to give people, young actors, that perspective. And we would shoot little student films so that they had the opportunity to experience what it was like to, here's the wide shot, the master. Now we're going to go into close-ups, and here we're going to cheat a shot because we don't want to see that piece of the wall. So we're going to move you over a little bit, or we want you closer together so that there isn't so much space between the two actors in frame. So teach them about the frame and about working with cameras. Otherwise, Tammy Beulah recently mentioned in the segment about the Cherry Blossom Festival that when she first came on set to do her very first episode of the Waltons, she said she arrived early because she wanted to have a chance to watch how it worked before she had to kind of get on set, because she'd only done theater. So I started very young, so I guess I just sort of got guided around, and I think they would expect that with children. So yeah, I think you kind of watch and you take your cue from what other people are doing and from observation, and then you just hope that people are kind about, oh, hey, could you move this or could you do that? And you make a few mistakes and you realize what you need to do. It was sort of, I remember the first time in The Homecoming when I was supposed to be doing that rant in the barn about while we're cracking walnuts, and I'm circling around. And the first time I did it, I was like really marching around. And they asked me to slow down. And I thought, well, this feels really stupid. I'm like in slow motion. Or Cammie talked about having to run to the front porch in the opening credit shot where Elizabeth comes running and she was told to kind of run in slow motion. And it can have to do with how fast the camera can follow you. And so in that circle, the camera was trying to follow me. And if I'm whipping around, that camera can't go that fast. So when you watch it, it doesn't look odd. But when you're doing it, it feels odd. So you begin to recognize that those corrections are not going to make you look stupid. It's just going to mean that it's not going to look crazy, chaotic in the frame. So there's a lot of just learning as you go along. And when you have the opportunity and are fortunate enough to have all the time that we spent on set, that what you learn is just invaluable. And you just take that to every other show you work on. So I hope this was informative to you and to everyone else watching. Thank you for the questions. This question is from Tamara, who said, as always, Judy, you did a super job answering so many fan questions. Thank you. I really enjoy it. There was a bit of everything. I had a question about the director's role. I wanted to know about the role of a director during setups. Does that mean that they are making crucial decisions about the setup of the scene for taking shots? Yes. As part of their preparation, they will kind of have a sense of how they want a scene to be staged. So they'll have that sense then of where they need the camera to be. So definitely their input about the staging of a scene will dictate where the camera is going to be. And also the director will make the choice about, in terms of what they shot, then how many close-ups or two shots or reverses or things they need to have. So definitely in the director's hands. The director can ask the camera, the cinematographer, director of photography, for assistance also, if it's kind of like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this, and what will that do, and get some input, because he will know how to also make it as efficient as possible. So in the little bit of directing I did for film and television, I did make use of my cinematographers to help me work out the most efficient way to shoot and to get what I needed. So then you went on to say, does this happen at the start of the scene or throughout, and also in action sequences? Yes, it's true throughout all of the filming of something. I was reading recently that David Lynch was quite involved with the setup of scenes in the project Dune and possibly others, and I wondered what that entailed. So there's going to be a lot of pre-production, especially on a big show. And even in the Waltons, they had a week of pre-production. So there would be time to talk about what was going to be needed, and for the director to walk through sets and kind of take a look at what they wanted to do to tell the story and utilize the actors they had, but also not get into a situation where they were going to need to do 100 shots, and that was going to be impossible. So yeah, working out all of that. And sometimes you draw diagrams, and sometimes with bigger films, they do storyboarding. So they've drawn out what all the main things are going to be so that they know exactly what they're going to be shooting. But that's a little more involved and doesn't happen so much in television. Piggybacking on that, I was going to share something that John Dayton, our production assistant, had talked about in answer one time to just sort of the people that are working relative to getting the show put together. And he said about rotating directors. One crew, our crew, was very small and very efficient. There were usually two directors working, the director who was shooting the current episode and a director who was preparing the next episode. A preparing first director worked with the preparing director, and a shooting first assistant worked with the shooting director. On the stage, shooting the current episode would be the shooting director, the shooting first assistant director, one second assistant director, and one production assistant. When I joined the show, there was no such thing as a production assistant at Lorimar. The second assistant had quite a load of work, and so I was hired on. In a nutshell, this was our directing department. One shooting director, one shooting first assistant director, one preparing director, one preparing first assistant director, one second assistant director, one production assistant. The preparing director and first might occasionally come to the stage, but most of the work was done in the production office, script revisions, casting, or if in the rare event there might be a local location, Whiteman Airport, for instance, in the Children's Carol, they would scout that out. The second assistant and production assistant were permanent, did not rotate, and were on set at all times. Not to confuse things, but there was also a unit production manager who ranked just below the producer. All of my production reports, call sheets, production equipment orders, including film stock and camera, had to be approved by the unit production manager. Later in the series, the UPM duties were taken over by the first assistant. If you look at the credits, you'll often see UPM first assistant is one person. By the way, the production assistant was never screen credited. The only time I was credited was when I appeared in front of the camera. It never bothered me, as it was the work that was important, not the credit. How we managed to film full episodes in 6.5 or 7 days was directly attributed to a miracle of talent in front of and behind the cameras. So thank you, John, for sharing those sort of technical details about how the crew was put together. Thank you for joining me for this segment of Ask Judy. If you enjoy these segments, please do hit like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time for more behind the scenes of the Waltons and more Ask Judy. Thanks for watching.